I remember that Thursday like it was yesterday. It was supposed to be just another ordinary evening. I was sprawled on the couch, mindlessly scrolling through my phone, waiting for Patricia to get home. The familiar ping of a text message caught my attention. It was her, saying she'd be late because of some work event. I didn't think much of it at first. Patricia's job in marketing often meant client dinners or company gatherings that ran late. But as I sat there, a nagging feeling started to creep in. This wasn't the first time she'd been late recently. And in fact, over the past month it had become more frequent, always with similar excuses. I tried to shake off the unease, telling myself I was being paranoid. Patricia and I had always been solid. We trusted each other completely. But something about this particular night felt different. The apartment seemed quieter, emptier somehow. I found myself checking the time more often, wondering when she'd walk through that door. As the minutes ticked by, I couldn't help but replay the past few weeks in my mind. The late nights, the vague explanations, the slight distance I'd felt growing between us. It was subtle, but it was there. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Patricia's excitement about meeting Zeke stuck with me, gnawing at the back of my mind. I tried to rationalize it. She was in marketing, after all. Meeting celebrities was part of the job. But the way her eyes lit up when she talked about him, it was different. Over the next few days, I caught myself watching Patricia more closely. She'd be on her phone, smiling at something on the screen, then quickly putting it away when I entered the room. Our conversations felt stilted, like we were both trying too hard to act normal. For one night, I woke up to find Patricia's side of the bed empty. I heard her voice from the living room, speaking in hushed tones. I lay there, debating whether to get up or not. Part of me wanted to know what was going on, but another part was afraid of what I might discover. When she finally came back to bed, I pretended to be asleep. The next morning, I casually asked if everything was okay. She brushed it off, saying it was just a work call. But at 2 a.m., it didn't add up. I started noticing other changes too. Patricia's style was evolving. She'd come home with new clothes, more revealing than her usual modest attire. Her makeup was bolder, and she'd started wearing perfume I didn't recognize. I tried to ignore the nagging doubts, to focus on work and our life together. But every time Patricia mentioned a late meeting or a work event, I couldn't help but wonder if Zeke would be there. Was I being paranoid? Or was there really something going on? One evening, as we sat on the couch watching TV, Patricia's phone buzzed. I caught a glimpse of a text notification, set with a flame emoji. My stomach dropped. "Everything okay?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. "Oh yeah," Patricia said, a little too quickly. "Just work stuff." I nodded, pretending to turn my attention back to the show, but inside my mind was racing. Who was Zay? Was it Zeke? And if it was, why was Patricia hiding it from me? Patricia's late nights became something of a routine. I'd wait for the door to creak open, but it'd never be before midnight anymore. There was always this strange smell clinging to her, the alcohol I understood, though it wasn't like her, but something else, something floral and sweet that I couldn't place. She'd stumble in, her words just clear enough to explain it away, networking. Sure, I know what that entails. Drinks with colleagues, exchanging business cards, but that was never the world she used to move in. Not like this. The worst part was the way she kept dodging my questions. I'd keep them light at first, trying to pretend I wasn't suspicious. "Rough night?" I'd ask, hoping she'd drop some hint of what was really going on. She'd flick me a practiced smile and give the same tired line. "Yeah, just meeting people. Work stuff. Always work stuff." A strange detachment floated above her responses, a kind of rehearsed carelessness I wasn't used to. The Patricia I knew used to trip over herself to explain even the smallest things, always worried about being misunderstood, always eager to share. Now she was evasive, like she kept parts of herself tucked somewhere far away, a Patricia carefully curated for me, a different one that no longer shared everything. I wasn't an idiot. I could sense there was more buried in those late nights with her phone buzzing. That message from Zay kept coming back to haunt me. Whoever this guy was, he was carving out real estate in her mind, her life, carving it away from me. Little by little, I started creating distance of my own. It wasn't even a conscious decision. At first, I found myself avoiding her lips in the mornings before heading out for work, or when we pretended to. Anyway, the silence had grown too thick between us to break with something as mundane as small talk. It always felt like there was something unsaid, hanging in the air, but if I tried to grab at it, it would vanish before I could get a hold of it. Patricia could feel it too. She wasn't oblivious. I could see it in the way she'd glance at me, searching my face for traces of what I used to give her with ease: affection, humor, trust. She wasn't getting any of that anymore. Instead, what passed between us was stilted conversations, lifeless. When we spoke, it was just passing information. "Now, did you take the trash out? What are we doing for dinner?" Gone were our long talks about where we saw the future going. both of us silently jumping past that like it was a bother to even consider. Neither of us wanted to poke at it. But this coldness, the routine detachment, was growing roots. And I could tell this wasn't just emotional distance. This was building up to something bigger, even if I couldn't quite see it yet. While I sat on the couch, scrolling through my phone for what felt like the 100th time, Patricia's text about being late due to another work event stared back at me. Normally I wouldn't think twice about it, but lately this had become a pattern. A nagging feeling gnawed at my gut. The house felt eerily quiet. I glanced at the clock, 10:30 p.m. Where was she? My mind wandered to the changes I'd noticed in Patricia over the past few weeks. Her excitement about meeting that rapper, Zeke. The secretive way she'd guard a phone. Even her style had shifted. More daring, less like the Patricia I knew. Restless, I decided to check my emails. Maybe there'd be something work-related to distract me. I grabbed my laptop from the coffee table and settled back into the couch. As I scrolled through my inbox, an unfamiliar subject line caught my eye. "You need to see this." My heart rate picked up. Who would send me something like that? Curiosity overrode my better judgment, and I clicked on it. Inside was nothing but a link to a video file. My finger hovered over it, hesitating. Did I really want to see whatever this was? Before I could talk myself out of it, I clicked play. The video started, and immediately I recognized Patricia's laugh. The camera was shaky, clearly filmed on someone's phone, but I could make out a group of people I didn't know. Music blasted in the background, the bass so loud it distorted the audio. I leaned closer to the screen, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The camera panned, revealing a large bed. My stomach clenched as I recognized Zeke and his entourage lounging around it. This wasn't some work event, so this was a party, and not the kind Patricia usually attended. Then she came into frame again. My breath caught in my throat. There was Patricia, my Patricia, in the middle of what I could only describe as a group. I couldn't even think the words. The flashing lights illuminated her face, a face I barely recognized. Gone was the modest, religious woman I'd fallen in love with. In her place was someone wild, uninhibited, lost in the moment with strangers. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. How could this be happening? Patricia, with her strict upbringing and moral values, engaging in something so depraved. But it didn't make sense. Yet there she was, clear as day on my screen. I couldn't look away. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion. Every second that ticked by revealed more of this secret life Patricia had been living. The woman on the screen bore no resemblance to the one I thought I knew. A cold, hollow feeling spread through my chest. My mind raced, trying to reconcile the Patricia I knew with the one in this video. How long had this been going on? How many times had she lied to me about work events? So I slammed the laptop shut, unable to watch anymore. The room spun around me as nausea welled up in my throat. I bolted for the bathroom, barely making it in time. As I retched into the toilet, my mind kept replaying what I'd seen. Patricia laughing with strangers. Patricia on that bed. Patricia betraying everything we'd built together. When I finally stumbled back to the couch, I felt empty, drained. The laptop sat there, a silent testament to the destruction of my world. I couldn't bring myself to open it again, to see if there was more to the video. What I'd already seen was more than enough. I picked up my phone, staring at Patricia's last text. How could she act so normal, knowing what she'd done? Flames of anger started to lick at the edges of my numbness. All those late nights, all those excuses, they'd all been lies. So I wanted to confront her, to demand answers. But as I sat there, surrounded by the remnants of our life together, I realized I didn't even know who she was anymore. The Patricia I loved, the one I thought I'd spend my life with, was gone. Patricia came home, and the stench hit me first, the mix of alcohol and some perfume that wasn't hers, too sweet, too heavy. She wobbled slightly as she set her bag down by the door like she didn't even care what kind of mess she might just walked into. My eyes locked on the couch cushion, fingers digging into the fabric tighter than I realized. So I could hear her moving around behind me, her casual greeting hanging in the air like nothing was out of the ordinary. As if it was any other night. I didn't move, didn't even give her the satisfaction of looking at her. It was like my body was trapped somewhere between fury and absolute emptiness, a feeling that clung to the pit of my stomach, heavy and raw. So this entire night, all while she was out pretending everything was fine, I'd been waiting here, legs stiff from pacing, mind spinning further into some dark, endless loop of scenarios, each one worse than the last. Finally, as if my mouth moved on its own, I asked, "Where were you tonight?" It came out more like a challenge than a question. Her steps stopped. I could feel her pausing behind me, her mind probably scrambling for the script she'd been rehearsing for weeks now, the same tired excuse. But this time I wasn't the old, clueless Matthew. Something had shifted, and I think she sensed it too. She hesitated before opening her mouth, and when she spoke, It was the same line she'd been using on me for what felt like forever. Work event. To work event? I repeated, my voice dipping low, almost too calm for how violently my brain was spinning. I let it stretch for a beat before digging the knife in. Is that what you call a freak-off now? The shock god, the way it washed across her face like she'd been slapped in a dream she didn't even know she was having. Her eyes went wide. She looked at me, really looked at me for the first time in who knows how long. I didn't wait for her reaction to settle. I reached for my phone, the motion almost mechanical, and pulled up the email. Honestly, I wasn't even sure how my hand wasn't shaking right then. It felt like an out-of-body experience, like I wasn't the one doing it. I thumbed to the video, tapped play, and handed it to her. Her face did this thing almost like a mask cracking in real time. That sweet innocence she always tried to project, mixed with that whole religious upbringing shtick, couldn't hold up against what was staring back at her from the screen. I could practically watch the blood drain, her tanned skin going pale under the dim lighting in the room. It was like the world around her collapsed in an instant, the mask falling apart entirely. At first, it was as if she wasn't sure how to react. Her lips opened and closed, her eyes darting from the screen back to me, desperate to find something to hang on to. But the reality of it was right there. There was no denying it anymore. It was a stupid mistake. She started, words spilling out of her like water from a burst pipe, every syllable reeking of desperation and fear. It didn't mean anything. Didn't mean anything. And thing. It was like that line was rehearsed too. Like she'd been telling herself that same lie as if she needed it to believe her own bullshit. But everything she'd been hiding was spilling out quicker than she could patch those holes. She didn't know when to shut up. Just kept stumbling over her words, half denying, half explaining as if any of this was going to justify the she'd been doing. She talked about Zeke, threw in some crap about his crowd, and how it wasn't supposed to be like this, how she got caught up in the moment. That phrase hung in the air like cigarette smoke, stinking up the whole conversation. Her voice trembled, genuinely trembled, but I didn't feel anything. Not anymore. I felt like I should be angry, right? Or maybe I should have yelled, just to get it out. But that wave of rage that had been building for weeks now, it had crested already. I rode it when I saw the video, when the last bit of whatever I had left in me was erased. Now there was nothing. I looked at her, the woman who had spent years with me, to the one who slept next to me, who I thought I knew inside and out. And I didn't know her at all, not anymore. She wasn't Patricia in that moment. She was like a stranger who'd crawled into her skin, mouthing typical lines like we're in some drama-filled soap opera. I waited for her to stop scrambling over her explanation, waited for it to die out like a winded dog half running out of breath, and then I said, "You betrayed me." Flat. No emotion. As if I was just narrating some mundane fact about the weather, instead of pointing out the wreckage of whatever was left between us. She broke after I said it. Her face contorted into some wreck of tears and guilt, her shoulders hunched like the weight of everything finally hit her all at once, and she tried to explain herself, everything from her messed up upbringing, to how she was drawn in by the allure of the nightlife, Zeke's magnetism. For a second, she almost gave me a little mercy by admitting her lies, admitting that those work events were really just a cover for the chaos she'd been spinning herself into. Deep down, she knew too, that she'd been playing with fire, that she'd been lying to me long before any of this even happened. But I sat there just listening. If you could call it that. I don't know. I heard her words, but they were just noise to me now. To the trust? Gone. The future I thought we were building, that was torched long before I even knew about it. And for what? Some fleeting adrenaline rush Patricia craved, a taste of something she felt was missing from her sheltered roots. Those days after I confronted her, they were like living in a fog. I couldn't see past the betrayal, couldn't hear my own thoughts over the noise it created in my head. I'd sit, staring at the same spot on the wall, wondering how the hell things fell apart so quickly. How we got from us planning vacations, talking about starting a family, to this, her with that idiot rapper. It wasn't just what she did, it was who she did it with. Someone who stood for everything I wasn't. Everything we weren't. She tried to fix it at first. Kept saying sorry like it was this magic word that put the pieces back together. The church sermon she suddenly started streaming at home were background noise, hollow and distant. The cracks in her voice when she mentioned forgiveness didn't hit me the way they used to. Before all this, I would have hugged her. Told her we'd work things out. Face it as a team. And that was long gone. When she said stuff like God forgives all sins, I'd just clench my jaw till it hurt. But my silence, it was deafening. Patricia's eyes always looked scared now, pleading like she was hoping any moment I'd snap out of it and start seeing her the way I used to. It just wasn't happening. I couldn't even bring myself to sleep in our bed. The couch became my new home base, where I could get as far from her without actually leaving yet. Nights were long, though. lying there on the couch, scrolling endlessly on my phone, avoiding any hint of Zeke or his stupid entourage. The cold fabric of a couch was better than the alternative lying next to someone I didn't even recognize anymore. She cried a lot. The first couple of days it was constant. Soft sobs in the middle of the night when she thought I couldn't hear. I could. Didn't care. Maybe not didn't care. But I was so drained of anything worth giving at that point. I don't know what I was supposed to do. Comfort her? For betraying me? Nah, my words to her were short, clipped. Whatever she needed to not completely self-destruct, I'm guessing, but nothing more than basic civility. We're out of detergent. Got it. That kind of thing. When she tried bringing us up again, nothing. It wasn't worth it. Patricia leaned into the church stuff even more after that. I guess she was hoping to find some redemption, or healing, or whatever they preach. But no amount of scripture was putting this back together. She'd call me Matthew, sorta gently, like she was hoping I'd respond with some warmth. All I could respond with was time to pack my things. Part of me had considered staying. We had so much history. But trust, once it's broken, it's impossible to look at someone the same way. So no matter how much you want the past to come back, the future will always be in the shadow of what happened. But the decision to leave came quietly. I'd been thinking about it for days, but once I knew, I just started packing. She wasn't ready for it. Thought we still had time, or that I'd come around. But I didn't want to wait for some magical transformation that wasn't coming. I grabbed what I needed, clothes, my work stuff, essentials only. Walking around what had been our home wasn't surreal, it was just empty. The place felt like it belonged to someone else entirely. When she saw me packing, her face dropped like someone had pulled the rug out from under her. Like she was still holding on to some delusion we'd patched things up. She stood in the doorway, blocking it like that could actually stop me. Tears again. Those same begging, pleading tears that I couldn't take anymore. "Don't go," she said. It was like she thought piling on more apologies would change anything. At some point, apologies become nothing but static, a bunch of sounds that lose any meaning. I didn't even have the energy to raise my voice. Didn't really see the point. "Hoping you find what you're looking for," I said, in the flattest tone possible. So I put any more effort into it. I was done. And then I left. Just like that. Walked out the door, past the sobbing Patricia who still wasn't ready to accept what she'd destroyed. Part of me wanted to feel something in that moment, some dramatic sense of closure, or finality as I left, but really, it just felt like shutting down a computer, a swift motion, and it was all off. I think that was what scared me the most. There wasn't any big blow-up, the love we once shared wasn't ripped apart in some movie-perfect explosion. It just fizzled, like it had run out of batteries. The months that followed were rough, but in a numb way, if that makes sense. I threw myself totally into work, picked up every extra hour, every after-hours call I could take. Anything to keep me from thinking about her, about them. Every now and then I'd hear one of Zeke's tracks on the radio, and that ice-cold anger would churn again in my gut. I changed the station every time. Couldn't get those images out of my head no matter what I did, but I tried like hell to drown them with work, with distractions. Good enough for me. I heard from mutual friends that Patricia had started going to church again, like full-time. I guess she was trying to break free of whatever drove her into Zeke's orbit. Didn't really matter though, not my life anymore. Some of them asked if I could ever forgive her. Could I find peace with it? It's not about hate. It's not even about holding on to the past forever. It's just you can't rebuild trust from ashes. Once it's gone, it's gone.